that in 1996, the white paper on land reform had set 1999 as the due date for a distribution of 30% of South Africa's land. It's 30 years later now. It's 25 years since 1999. Not even 10% of the land has been redistributed from those who are occupying it through colonialism and settler barbaric colonialism.
We haven't really addressed the real issue. If the issue was all about land, I promise you people would not be living in Limpopo, people will not be living KZN, people will not be living in the Eastern Cape. They are living and going into where the economy is. People are chasing more the economy, and we need to then address that. Once we address the issue of the economy, we can then talk about where people are settling.
They're both looking at you in this.
So in this video, the EFF Vice President, Floyd Shivambu, is actually confronted by a black member of the DA party, arguing that land is not a problem in South Africa. Rather, the major problem lies with economic growth. Let's listen to what he has to say about this issue, and I'll be back for some analysis.
I think what is absent is a comment on what we're going to do about land redistribution. Unfortunately, informal settlements are a product of landlessness. They're a product of our history, as the EFF has noted, but they are also an urbanization issue, as the ANC has noted. So ultimately, you know, in addition to the economic factors, we can't hide away from the fact that land redistribution is needed. And currently, that is the problem with Slovo Park, where the city and province both don't know what to do with acquiring the land that is apparently owned by the province.
Okay, thank you. Quick one. I'll give you each a sentence to respond, Mr. Masoledi, and then Mr. Shivambu, and then you, Mr. Msimang.
Well, on the issue of the land, we agree wholeheartedly. And you are aware that we also subscribe to the issue of land, to redistribute land, and also to make sure that there's no, the law on compensation which has been followed, that we do not actually support it, as you know. On that one, we are together with EFF, except that when it came to voting, they deserted us.
Okay.
It has been happening now. They deserted us, but we are still pursuing that. We know it needs 2/3. We know that one day, as black people, realize that we need land and do that.
Floyd, your take. Well, that one day being 30 years if you're not in government.
Do you know that in 1996, the white paper on land reform had set 1999 as the due date for a distribution of 30% of South Africa's land? It's 30 years later now. It's 25 years since 1999. Not even 10% of the land has been redistributed from those who are occupying it through colonialism and settler barbaric colonialism, because of an incapable, directionless government of the ANC. And when we then came as the economic freedom fighters, we say that this piece-by-piece redistribution of land has not worked because it, in majority of cases, is faced with litigation of people who are saying that you cannot take my farm, you must take these ones instead of this. Why taking mine? Why prioritizing mine instead of the other one? Then we say that let us do to the land resources what was done to the petroleum and mineral resources, to water resources, what the People's Republic of China is doing, of getting the land to be under the custodianship of the state so that we can be able to allocate it to everyone equitably representative and reflective of the demographics of South Africa.
And that's where you and
that is our position, that is it. Of course, then the ANC had initially agreed to our position, and then they later on said that the only land that can be taken without compensation is barren land, is rotten land, is land which is not strategic. That is why we voted against what they're proposing.
The difference was in
terms of
when you say that land, for example, that is taken or redistributed or meant for redistribution, the state should be the custodian. And I think that was the core difference between the EFF and the ANC.
Yes, on the expropriation without compensation, we fully agree. The difference, yes,
is on custodianship.
When they said all the land must be owned by the state only, meaning individuals can't own land.
Right.
That is where we differ.
DA, you don't want any of it. Sorry, you don't want any of it.
There can be an ongoing discussion and debate. about whether land expropriation without compensation is actually legal or not legal. It's actually there in the constitution of the country. They haven't been able to then adequately use it, and instead, where they've been able to then use it, it has been used to advantage those that are politically connected, and it has actually then resulted in a whole lot of corruption. So that is the first thing.
So you don't agree?
Hang on. The second thing is this year. We haven't really addressed the real issue. If the issue was all about land, I promise you people would not be living Limpopo, people would not be living KZN, people would not be living in the Eastern Cape. They are leaving and going into where the economy is. People are chasing more the economy, and we need to then address that. Once we address the issue of the economy, we can then talk about where people are settling.
They're both looking at you in disbelief, by the way. This is the big debate. When we return...
Yeah, so what do you guys think? It's also related to my last video on the necessity of land reform. So it felt, if we according to the EFF, they take their issue back to 1913, to the Natives Land Act of 1913, when government actually forcefully took land from the black people and actually forcefully forced those people out of their native homes, and they had to look for work in somewhere. So this had to do with more of the restructuring of South Africa at the time in the early 1920s thereabout. And so the EFF argues that for economic growth and prosperity to begin effectively, they must get back to that root where the land was actually forcefully taken from black people, and then proceed on from there to address the historical injustice that seems to have been impacted on black people. So, this DA party representative here actually argues that the land in itself is not the problem, because there are other major issues that actually are confronting South Africa at the moment. One of them is the issue raised by Musi Maimane, that South Africans, one of the biggest issues of South Africa is unemployment, right? And the fact that the youth of South Africa are not just unemployed, but they're unemployable, which means that they don't have the sufficient capacity to be able to offer services to an employer, for example, that wishes to give them employment. And so, coupled with that and many other indices within the state of South Africa, those would actually need to be redressed more than just the issue with land. Because at the end of the day, if land is given to people who do not understand how to work land and all that, the economics surrounding the development of land would actually hinder the prosperity that could come out of that land. So this is the DA's position to the whole debate on land and the focus of land, which is a core cardinal pillar, non-negotiable pillar of the EFF. And so it's a really interesting one. It's a really complicated one as well. I actually see both parties have an interesting point of view in that they both feed on each other. Okay, so if the land issue can be redressed properly with cooperation between the whites and the blacks, who have, especially the white farmers, who are light years ahead of whatever the black farmers would be able to accumulate, especially in terms of knowledge at the moment. If there can be a healthy frolicking between those two parties, and then also focus on the economy. So there are many other parts of the economy that need to be addressed. Load shedding, water shedding. For me, for example, I'm from West Africa, and I know that in West Africa there's a large issue with electricity, especially for one of the most prosperous nations in Black Africa, like Nigeria. There's still a large issue with electricity, even though the Nigerians are so relentless and resilient. And even with the power of generators, they're still able to dominate major spaces like music and, many other sectors that the world actually recognizes Nigeria for. Most of those victories have been done on the power of generators, right? Fuel power generators, because of this lack of electricity. And so if South Africa would need to plunge, a little bit above that sphere and really make impact in the world, things like electricity, things like water, things like, other elements of the economy would need to really be addressed before, especially this whole thing with land can take root. So this is one perspective that the DA, has. The EFF, on the other hand, thinks that possession of land, ownership of land by the people that have been disenfranchised for a long time from history, actually sort of like builds a certain confidence to start building and working and, you know, making negotiations to grow their economic, you know, standing in that regard, and then from there grow upwards. And this is the perspective. This is their perspective, that in terms of economic growth, it has to also start with ownership. And ownership is key. Ownership brings confidence. Ownership brings a certain form of power, and then springboard from there. But these are two really interesting perspectives, and it's always the character of sociology. It's always a structure, it's character of you know, the humanities, that we study all these elements and really understand the different perspectives to growth and development of a society. And a society like South Africa is really interesting because there are many indices to really consider before making a final, really potent position in terms of growing and helping such a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multicultural society as South Africa. But I don't know, what do you guys think about this debate here? Share your thoughts in the comments.